Hello, everyone. This is Scribe, and today I'm going to be talking about the Doctor Strange movie. One of my viewers had, I think, actually, it was one of our stream viewers on the Monkey streams had suggested that I talk about Doctor Strange. I apologize, I forget who it was that suggested this. Um, but yeah, I have some thoughts on it. I know this isn't exactly the most fresh take, so to speak, as the movie's been out for quite some time. It did just get released on Netflix in the last couple of weeks, I think, so it's might be new to some people who hadn't seen it before. Um, First and foremost, I have to say that Doctor Strange is one of my favorite characters. He's not a character that I collect a lot of stuff of. I have some of his comic books, but I just like the character by himself, based primarily on his origin story and sort of his role in the Marvel universe. I'll get to his origin story in a moment and why that's so important to the character, and then we'll talk about how it appeared in the movie. But first, let me take a look at the chat so I can say hi to people. Bloodwing, hello. Satan and Satire, hello. Weaponized Retard, hello. Dectron, hello. I know Monkey was in here earlier, if he's not still here. Lucky Pop Tart, hello. So, first, I want to talk about briefly the importance of magic in the Marvel universe, or at least the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'll try to confine it to that. The Marvel movies prior to Doctor Strange had mostly tread very lightly on the subject of magic. Now, a lot of what Loki could do, a lot of the things that happened in Thor or related to Thor could easily be seen as magic, but there's this sort of layered separation between what gods or godlings can do and what is actual magic. And they even tried to make this distinction in the first Thor movie when Thor is trying to explain to Jane Foster the difference between science and magic, where he comes from, where they're sort of indistinguishable from one another. And that's about as close as the Marvel Universe ever got to magic. And I think I know why. At least this is my supposition. One of the things that makes Doctor Strange a kind of difficult character to work with on a long-term basis in his own series is that at a certain point, magic can do anything. Magic can alter reality. Magic can, move mountains and cure disease and so on. So when you have a character that is the master of the magic arts, and magic can do anything, he can quickly become a Deus Ex Machina character with just a solution for anything. And then the tension is gone, the suspense is gone. What do you do? You have to be able to somehow set rules on how magic works in any particular universe in order to create that tension, retain some kind of conflict, and not make everybody just an immediate problem solver with a snap of their fingers. This problem, so to speak, was exemplified to me in one of the earlier collections of Doctor Strange stories. And I forget which one it is, I apologize, but I've got these collections of it's all in black and white collections of Doctor Strange comic books from years and years ago. And you can kind of tell when they switched writers on this particular story arc, because there's this great little story that opens up with Doctor Strange arriving back from some adventure off in the multiverse somewhere. And his assistant Wong, or apprentice, comes up to him and says, "Master, I hate to bother you with this, but the rent's coming due and we have no money." And Doctor Strange suddenly realizes that, oh yeah, being Sorcerer Supreme doesn't really bring in a paycheck. And so he has to sort of stop and bring himself down to the temporal plane a little bit to understand that, oh, I have to do something to earn a living because I'm not a surgeon anymore. And, doing magic off in other dimensions isn't really a lucrative business. So there's this great little sequence where he is on the phone calling up people trying to get a job as a stage magician, or maybe as a consultant for, medical studies or something. And It's hilarious, and it's also really great. It really, I mean, quite literally brings the character down to earth and humanizes him and adds a whole new aspect to the character's existence that hadn't been there before. Within an issue or two, very briefly, you can tell they changed writers who didn't want to deal with that kind of aspect or that kind of difficulty in the guy's life. Because in the very first page or so, Wong again comes up to Doctor Strange and says, "Master, the rent's coming due and we still don't have any money." And I think I'm quoting almost verbatim from the comic book. Doctor Strange says, "Bah, what is money to one such as Doctor Strange?" And he snaps his fingers and there is a bucket of money. I'm not even kidding. There is a bucket of coins and dollar bills just suddenly there. And Wong's like, "Oh, excellent, sir," and moves on. This is the problem with Doctor Strange if you're not careful or if you're lazy. This is the problem with magic in general if you're not careful or if you're lazy. So Marvel was very slow in moving up towards introducing magic and the occult specifically into the cinematic universe. And I can understand why. You got to kind of build up to that. You got to earn getting to that place with other stories before, because that's a big concept to introduce. Also a very dangerous one plot-wise, depending on how you do it. That's why I was surprised when I saw the previews for Suicide Squad, and one of the characters in there was the Enchantress. And I thought, wow, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, boom, Suicide Squad, and magic, actual magic. I thought, I really hope, for their sake, DC sets some pretty hard and fast rules on how their magic works in their universe, or else they're going to have some problems in continuity and plot line down the line. Because that was quick. It doesn't really matter because Suicide Squad was not that great, but that's a different conversation. Okay, so that's why magic and setting the rules is important, and why I think Marvel was wise to build up to that rather than just diving into it. Now, Doctor Strange as a character. Wait a second. I'm going to go to the chat real quick. Let's see. Satan says, "I really wish Fox didn't get the rights to the X-Men. I want my X-Men in the MCU." Yes, the rights to the X-Men in total, even the reference to the word mutant, belong to Fox. Spider-Man, the license belongs to Sony. Just about every character license in the Marvel, plethora or mythology has reverted back to Marvel at this point. Though I do believe that a standalone Hulk movie, like a Hulk movie that's got no other major characters in it, and Hulk is the star, the distribution rights, I think, still belong to 20th Century Fox. Like, Marvel can use the character, but there's some weird contractual things that prevent a standalone Hulk movie to be made without doing a whole bunch of negotiations with another studio. I think it's 20th Century. It could be somebody else. I forget off the top of my head. But yeah, so X-Men characters, anybody associated with that, and any mention of the word mutant, all of that belongs to Fox. None of that will show up in the mainstream MCU movies unless or until some crazy Spider-Man-ish negotiation takes place. Now, the one exception to this is Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. These characters were retroactively made into Magneto's children after appearing in the Avengers. So since the characters' origins are in the Avengers, but they are also so closely tied to the X-Men, there's kind of this weird shared ownership between the characters. This is why you have a Quicksilver in the X-Men movies, and you have a surviving Scarlet Witch in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They killed off their Quicksilver real fast, no pun intended, in order to avoid any confusion for any uses that Fox might make of Quicksilver in the future. And so Marvel gets to keep the Scarlet Witch. I'd be surprised if Scarlet Witch showed up in the X-Men continuity, but it's possible because both studios kind of own the rights. But that aside, so Doctor Strange's origin, I think, is one of the best comic book superhero origins ever, because it is indirect. The core origin story is not one of a really nice person who, has something horrible happen and then is already courageous and everything. The origin story of Doctor Strange is really one of and redemption and sort of learning humility, whereas there hadn't been much before. And to predicate everything from here on forward, this is all spoilers. If you haven't seen Doctor Strange, if you know nothing about Doctor Strange, if you've never read a comic book, I'm going to go as deep as is necessary here. So if I spoil anything for you, here's your warning. So the origin of Doctor Strange is that Stephen Strange was a brilliant surgeon. In the original comic book, they don't really define what kind of surgeon he was, but it's eventually retconned into him being a neurosurgeon, but also sort of a surgeon extraordinaire. He's just a really good doctor. And he is an arrogant, selfish, narcissistic jerkwad. He is so full of himself and his sort of a God complex in his abilities to cure people of disease and, all that kind of stuff. And he's not unjustified because he is brilliant. He takes on a client, he takes on a situation. Pretty much that client is getting the best care that money can provide. And Doctor Strange in the beginning is very concerned about money because he'll only take on clients that give him more prestige or cases that are complex and seem impossible that he can solve and become the great hero and so on. So he's not a very nice guy. Brilliant surgeon, not a nice guy. One night, as he is driving to some fancy party, he has a car accident and he's run off the road or he slides off the road. I believe the gist of it is it was from his own inattentiveness or something that he drives himself off the road. It's all his own fault. Car crashes, and as a consequence, his hands get crushed in the accident. He wakes up in the hospital. His hands are all bandaged up, and he's told that he'll probably have permanent nerve damage in his hands for the rest of his life. This, of course, puts his surgical career in, pretty much to an end, unless something can be done. And so Doctor Strange, desperate to regain the thing that made him special, desperate to reclaim that which he based his entire life around, his career, his ego, exhausts his entire fortune looking for a cure, looking for some kind of procedure, some kind of therapy, something that will restore his hands. And so over the intervening months, he basically spends himself bankrupt trying to find a cure for this. And he's not bringing any money in because he's not a surgeon anymore. So eventually he goes completely bankrupt. And eventually, at least in the comic books, goes homeless. And so he's down in the Bowery next to the docks or whatever, and he's just, he's down and out, all scruffy. He's at his last leg, and he's in some dive bar, and he overhears some sailors talking about the myth of the Ancient One, off in some far Tibetan-like land that can cure any disease or something. And Strange at this point is kind of desperate and delusional and half mad, maybe with his failure and his inability to regain the life he had. And so he spends the last few dollars that he has to buy a ticket to Nepal, I think it was, and climbs the mountain desperately off to this temple. And he goes in the temple, and there on top of a giant throne is the Ancient One, this wizened old man sitting there. And Dr. Strange, pleads his case. He says, "Please, you must heal my hands. I'm a great surgeon. There's so many lives I could save, blah, blah, blah." And the Ancient One, being very wise, looks down at Strange and says, "I don't think that benevolence or, helping people is really your true motivation. It doesn't seem that way to me." And Dr. Strange's like, no, what are you talking about? It's like, such a gift has to be earned. So you have to prove to me that you are worthy of such assistance. So he puts Strange to work, basically being like a janitor, a servant in his temple, and he's doing stuff and everything else. And at the temple is the Ancient One's current apprentice, Carl Amadeus Mordo, or Baron Mordo. And Mordo, with a name like that, he's obviously a bad guy. This is back in the 60s, so everything had to be very polarized, black and white. Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? And Strange overhears Mordo mumbling to himself about how he's going to kill the Ancient One. The Ancient One isn't teaching him all he needs to know as quickly as he wants to. He's better than the Ancient One. He's going to take all the Ancient One's powers and become, master of the mystic arts. And so Strange is like, oh, I got to go tell the Ancient One. Well, Mordo catches him eavesdropping and slaps a curse on him that disallows Strange from speaking ill of Mordo. And so he tries to go tell the Ancient One what's going on, but the words just will not come to him, and he can't even signal to the Ancient One what's up. So Strange eventually finds a smart way around this. I'll leave that as something I won't spoil just for the sake of fun. And eventually, gets the message to the Ancient One that he's in danger. The Ancient One, defeats Mordo and exiles him, and then he begins teaching Dr. Strange, how to become a sorcerer. And so the experience of having to serve at the feet of a superior person, learning humility, working through. I mean, he didn't. There was no incentive for him to save the Ancient One, save for the fact that the guy could possibly cure his hands, but he never does cure his hands. The hands always kind of remain injured. And over the course of several comic books and a couple of retcons, it becomes a story of a guy who was all full of himself and eventually learns about the larger world, the larger responsibility that the Ancient One has, and subsequently he has, to try to protect the Earth realm, our little dimension, from threats that are from beyond and all this other stuff. And that's where you get into the really psychedelic, weird Steve Ditko-esque stuff of that era in the art and such. And so it's a great origin story because it's unexpected. It's not, I get bitten by a radioactive spider and suddenly I have powers. It's a character evolution from the get-go, from narcissistic to Strange was never actually became that nice of a guy. He was always very stoic, very dry humor, and could be kind of a dick a lot of the times. That was kind of the deal. He never quite overcame all of his original attitudes, but he did become a hero, and he did become a wise person in the Marvel universe. Super powerful one too. So when I heard they were going to make a Doctor Strange movie, I knew first and foremost they had to get the origin story right, or else the character just would not be the same. Okay, so we've done the origin story. Let's talk about casting real quick. Originally, one of the original hypes about who was going to play Doctor Strange was Joaquin Phoenix. And when I heard that, I thought, great. Joaquin Phoenix, for everything else you might say about his kooky choices of acting in movies the last couple of years, Joaquin Phoenix is a great actor. Great actor, really gets into it, really intense. A serious actor, doesn't do a whole lot of comedy, and very professional. Even with his side project of where he went insane or whatever, which was all a joke, which was kind of weird. But otherwise, fine actor. And I thought that'd be great. Because that's what Doctor Strange needs. Doctor Strange needs someone who can do serious, intense, and drama. But then those negotiations broke down, and it was announced that Benedict Cumberbatch would be taking over. And I had my hesitations about that as a fan of the character. First and foremost, I thought Cumberbatch was overexposed as an actor at that point. And still to a certain extent. I mean, he was everywhere doing everything between Sherlock and the voice of Smaug and Imitation Game and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and so on and so on and so on. He was all over the place. And I thought Doctor Strange required not an unknown actor, but someone who wasn't, like cotton candy, just sort of like seemed like filler. And I'm not saying that Benedict Cumberbatch is a bad actor or anything like that. It just, at the time I thought, I don't know if this is the right guy for it, personally. But didn't matter, not like my decision. Now, he did a decent job. It was kind of weird knowing that he's British and he was suppressing his British accent the whole time. You cannot, or at least I could not, separate a thought of this is Dr. House, because Hugh Laurie doing Dr. House and trying to be a smarmy, wry American doctor who's played by a British man who's really successfully suppressing his British accent. So Doctor Strange, Doctor House, I couldn't quite separate that notion as I was watching the movie. But that was all right. That wasn't that bad. So the movie opens up badly, in my opinion. The movie opens up with a unrelated, at least at the time, magical fight between our main villain, and I'll get to that later, and the character who we would come to know as the Ancient One for the sake of this movie. They have this crazy, psychedelic, Inception-esque building twisting fight in the middle of New York at the beginning of the movie to open up the film. Just to sort of establish that this is the bad guy, this is the good guy, and they are in conflict. I thought it was a ridiculous mistake to show off the magic right at the beginning in the first 5 minutes. I thought it would be much better to build up to that revelation in concert with Doctor Strange. I thought it would be much better to sort of open up with a ER Doctor House-esque kind of medical drama at the hospital that has nothing to do with magic, is all based on empirical science, etc. And then as Strange has his accident and becomes more desperate and enters a very different world from his protected sort of high-rise richness to having to be desperate to look for anything to try to cure himself, that we would, as the audience, join Strange into this journey of discovery. But they decided to blow their load, so to speak, in the first 5 minutes, which I thought was bad. And then we immediately jump into what I had hoped kind of the movie would open with, was Doctor Strange in action in a hospital doing his surgery stuff. They established early on, and this was actually a brilliant, I thought, plot device for the sake of the character. They introduced early on that he has an eidetic memory, or he's got a photographic memory, more or less. And so he can remember all types of stuff, which helps to explain how he's able to learn magic and associate one thing with another so quickly in relative terms to other students later on in the movie. I don't think that was something that had been attributed to the character in the comic books previously. I could be mistaken, but for the sake of the movie, I was like, okay, it's a convenience. It's not an impossible convenience, but okay, I'll let that go. And so they establish Doctor Strange, first and foremost, as, yes, a serious doctor. He's a little bit full of himself, but he's also funny. And this is a problem I had with the character throughout the film, is that he's almost a jokester in several places. He's almost like got not even a wry sense of humor, but a corny sense of humor. That really detracted for me from the character that I had hoped would be portrayed here, because Doctor Strange was not that kind of jokester. He was not that kind of funny. Kind of diminished things, made it a bit more kid-friendly, I guess. Didn't make me that happy. Secondly, they introduce early on this kind of friendship / romance between himself and the lady doctor, whose name I can't even remember right now because she was so unimportant to this movie, save for one scene. One sequence in the film is where she actually has a purpose in the plot line of things. But other than that, the notion that there's some real deep, meaningful romance between these two characters is never firmly established. And it just, you could have taken her out of the movie completely, and you wouldn't have lost anything in the overall context of the film. So Doctor Strange, he, they establish him as a surgeon. He goes and has his accident, and then he has to, he finds out that there was this other doctor, or this other person, I guess, who went through some crazy accident and was paralyzed from the neck down, and then somehow he was able to regain total mobility. It was like a miracle. And so after his hands get all fucked up, he goes and finds this guy and says, what's the secret? How'd you do it? What happened? And this guy turns him on to, there's this place over in, nebulous Middle Eastern or Indian, Southeast Asian country to go to find the Ancient One. There was a lot of controversy over the portrayal of the Ancient One. The Ancient One in the comic books was sort of this, Nepalese, uh, Asian, ancient old man on a mountain kind of thing. And oh, we can't have that because that would be a racist stereotype. So instead, we're going to make the Ancient One a bald Celtic woman who's doing magic in Far East country. Instead of on top of a mountain, she's got like a little donut shop thing in the middle of a bazaar somewhere. Okay. I mean, it didn't bother me that much. I'm not so much a purist that the Ancient One has to be this, that, or the other thing. It just seemed pointless. Like, why? What difference does it make if you've got a Celtic woman versus an ancient old man on a hill? I don't know. It didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand what the whole hubbub was about. I mean, it was one of those situations where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you have the Ancient One portrayed as in the comic books, you're being true to the comic books. And it's like, okay, but is it a stereotype? I guess, but are there not monks and old men on hills in Nepal that have ancient wisdom? But then, of course, the people who like, oh, you whitewashed it. That was the other thing too. It's like if you've done it the one way, it's a stereotype. You do it the other way, you whitewashed an Asian character. There's no winning. As far as I'm concerned, just stick with the canon material and move onward. Doing anything else will not last the test of time as much as just staying true to the source material. Let's see. I'm going to go back to the chat real quick. Scribe, the Ancient One thing did not bother me. It didn't really bother me too. I thought that the whole hubbub over it was more annoying than the actual result. So whatever. And that's from Jacob. Let's see. Verapane says the Ancient One was Tibetan. China does not want the world to recognize there are Tibetan people. Scribe like that is also true. That is an aspect that I think I was going to mention, but thank you for reminding me. One of the other considerations this movie had to make was the international market, and China that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people with a lot of movie spending money. A lot of people that are willing to shell out the cash for a fun movie. And because of the politics of things, if the movie had acknowledged that Tibet was a thing all by itself, that would anger the Chinese government, and they probably wouldn't let the movie be distributed in their country, which is a bad financial move. So, yeah, there are concessions made all over the place for politics. Like I say, it didn't super bother me, but it just seemed pointless, the whole thing. Anyway, so Strange goes off, finds the Ancient One. That's when we get our honestly impressive and fun, psychedelic, Steve Ditko, out of the 60s, acid trip sequences of Doctor Strange sort of jetting through the multiverse. I think that it was appropriate that it took this long to do an actual Doctor Strange movie, putting aside the TV movie from years and years ago. We're not going to talk about that one, because the visuals and the aesthetic that Steve Ditko established in regards to the magical realms that Doctor Strange traversed in the comic books, I think they could only really have been pulled off special effects wise these days with computer animation and such. If they tried to do it with green screen stuff back in the 80s or whatever, or models, I mean, you could probably get away with it. It'd just be a heck of a lot more work, I suppose. It probably wouldn't look quite right. But in this instance, yeah, those were great. And I didn't see the movie in 3D. I can only imagine how crazy it must have been if you saw that in 3D. Doctor Strange is convinced that there is magic. He begs to be taught. There's some, pointless him sitting by the door, a la Fight Club kind of thing, waiting to prove his dedication to wanting to learn this stuff. And eventually he is brought in to learn how to do magic. And this is where one of the things about the movie that bugged me really comes to the fore, and that is the passage of time, which is ironic given one of the main plot points of the film, and the continuity of the film within the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, it is, I could be corrected because I've only seen the film once. I saw it once in the theater. I've seen little bits and pieces of clips of it since. But there are not many anchoring points in the movie to tell us when this movie is taking place in relation to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It has since been clarified, but when you're watching the movie, if you're a fan of the MCU, it's difficult to tell. The only thing that kind of told me what was going on is right before his accident, Doctor Strange is on the phone with his assistant, and the assistant is telling him about a potential case for him to work on where a soldier had his spine turned 360 or 180 degrees around. Now, some people, not having the older Marvel movies in their heads, might have assumed that this dealt with Rhodey having essentially broken his back at the end of Civil War. But in my head, the first thing I thought of was this little piece of test footage in Iron Man 2 at the congressional hearing or whatever, where Justin Hammer, the videos showing his attempts at making an Iron Man suit, show a person, presumably inside of an Iron Man-ish suit, and the top half of the body turns 180 degrees around backwards, and you hear a scream. And the Justin Hammer makes some comment about that man survived or something. So in my head, I thought, okay, so this movie is taking place, and then that film footage was taken at some point in the past, obviously. So this movie is taking place somewhere between Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2. This is where we're beginning. That's the only sort of anchor I had in my head. As far as I know, there is no other reference over the course of the film that kind of tells us where we're at. And this is a problem for me because, as far as I can tell, if you're watching the movie straight and you don't think about it too much, you would think that Strange loses the ability to use his hands. Some time passes, at least as far as facial hair growth, and then he goes off to Tibet or wherever we're at, unspecified Middle Eastern type-ish country, and then or Far East country, whichever. And then he starts learning magic, and within a week, he's got the uniform, he's fighting guys, etc. This bugged the hell out of me. First and foremost, that they weren't more clear about where the movie set in the chronology. At any point, they could have had a new story. Like at the end of Iron Man 2, at the very end, when when Tony Stark is talking to Nick Fury, in the background of this scene is a little screen playing footage from the Incredible Hulk movie, showing that Iron Man 2 ended about the place where the Hulk movie was beginning. And it was very subtle. It was just in the background, but it created a hook to tell you where things sit as far as the continuity of things. They could have put a newspaper heading. They could have had a news report somewhere in there to kind of tell us where we were in time from the beginning of the movie to the end, where he's talking to Thor, apparently in the quote-unquote modern day of the MCU, after Civil War, but before Thor Ragnarok. And so the passage of time was bad for me. It didn't show the passage of time as in any kind of concise way. There was no montages. There was no sense of him learning the stuff over the course of months, which it would make more sense because Doctor Strange was in study in the comic books for years before the Ancient One finally gave over the title of Sorcerer Supreme to him. And the Ancient One was always sort of this mentor floating out in the distance kind of thing for Doctor Strange until the one day the Ancient One finally dies for reals, and hands the title over. So that went far too quick for me, and I didn't enjoy that at all. I thought that made it seem like magic is no big deal, and so I was mad there wasn't something more time passagey to begin with to show he was actually working for a long time. Because when they open up the movie with the bad guy doing the bad guy things, there's this sense of immediacy. This problem is happening now. The bad guy's looking for the secret scrolls now. It's happening in this moment. So there's no sense that we can wait until we get to the bad guy showing up. It would have been better if they'd established the bad guy as like within the magical college, let's call it. If Mads Mikkelsen's character, I can't even pronounce his name. It's like Kalakimo Kwakawaka or something. Anyway, If they'd established him as just one of the teachers there, and Mordo was his student, and then about a third of the way through the movie, the guy goes rogue at that point, without having introduced him at the beginning of the film in that magical fight. Then he goes rogue, then he becomes the bad guy, and Strange has already been in training for months and months and months to this point through montage or anything else, or calendar pages flipping by would have taken even. And then they have to go after the guy. But no, it's already happening. The bad guy's already in process. So it's like this sense of urgency to try to make Doctor Strange ready for action immediately. And it just throws the whole thing off as far as I was concerned. And that's the other thing too. The bad guy, Mads Mikkelsen's character, was boring. He didn't do anything. It was like I didn't understand his motivation. I didn't know anything about him. He was a bad guy from the beginning. There's no evolution of the character, not even a little bit. He just is. He's just the bad guy. He's just trying there to kill everything and serve his master and all this other stuff. There's not much to say about him. He was just like your stock villain. There's no depth. There was nothing exciting about him. He didn't have any great one-liners. It's just Mads Mikkelsen looking creepy and being Mads Mikkelsen. It's like, and after seeing him in Hannibal and stuff like that, where this guy's got depth of character and he can do some really cool stuff, it was sort of like Christopher Eccleston being the lead dark elf in Thor 2. Yeah, look, here's Christopher Eccleston as the leader of the Dark Elves. We've got him under 10 tons of makeup. You can't even really tell it's him, and we don't give him anything to do. But hey, it's Christopher Eccleston. Yeah. And now, and the movie really felt safe. It felt like it wasn't taking any chances with anything. It was just a very average film overall. There wasn't anything really memorable about it. It didn't take any chances. The hero was, I would have liked, like I said, I would have liked Strange to be mostly a jerk throughout the entire thing, where you kind of, you understand that he's the good guy, and he is the good guy, and he does good things, but also has an edge to him. But he's like playing practical jokes on Wong. He's like dipping in little portals and stuff and doing this, that, and the other thing. And the Beyonce stuff. I thought Wong listening to Beyonce, there's just these cheesy, unnecessary little points of comic relief when you don't have to have relief in a movie that isn't serious to begin with. It was all out of place. It didn't feel right. The whole thing did not feel right. But it felt like this is a movie that they're trying to really cater to the broadest audience possible. And the occult stuff was handled, kind of like superpowers, that kind of stuff. I mean, the Cloak of Levitation was a fun little thing. If the Cloak of Levitation had been the comic relief of the film alone, that would have been fine. But it's blunted by all this other goofiness they were doing over the course of time. The evolution of Baron Mordo as first an ally of Strange and everything was interesting. I mean, we knew that couldn't last, obviously. The turning point for why he suddenly went rogue against Doctor Strange is it felt forced. They kind of have a parting of ways on how to deal with the Ancient One's revelation that in order to do what she was doing, she was dipping into the dark dimension, which was a big no-no. It's like, oh, she's a hypocrite and everything else. And Strange kind of understood her pragmatism, and Mordo's like, no, it's a big betrayal of everything she said. She's a liar, etc. And so Mordo takes this lesson and decides to go hunting mages, I guess. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. The one thing that I will give the movie that I am really impressed with, and I'm glad they did, was the ending. The way Strange fought the real bad guy, Dormammu, the guy behind the bad guy. This is the problem with having two bad guys. You had the subordinate bad guy who wasn't very interesting, and then when you finally get to the big bad guy, the god behind him, that's the best part of the movie, even though the big bad guy is just a big bad guy. Strange doesn't win the fight with the big bad guy. This was so brilliant. It was on point with how Doctor Strange stories should go. Strange wasn't about like blowing shit up and killing people and that kind of stuff. He was about solving problems. He was about understanding the forces of the universe and that kind of thing. And so the big MacGuffin in this movie is the time infinity gem. Because all these movies have to have one infinity gem sort of at the core of their story somewhere. And time was the big thing. And so they're talking about how, oh, you know, we're all going to be taken to the dark dimension where time doesn't exist. And so Strange gets his ideas like, oh, what if I took time to the dark dimension? So he takes, you know, the time magic with him to the dark dimension, and he sticks Dormammu in this loop, this time loop, this constant forever time loop of Strange coming to him and saying, you know, Dormammu, I'm here to bargain or whatever, or I'm here to negotiate. And Dormammu just kills him. It's like, I can do that. But Strange has set a time loop in process, and so Strange just keeps coming back to that same moment over and over again in this universe without time. And Dormammu just keeps trying to kill him and kill him and kill him. And who knows how many times Strange dies. It's the one time where they do a montage of stuff, and it's just impossible to tell how much time, quote unquote, has been passing over the course of this one scene. And so Strange dies. The hero dies, and he doesn't kill the bad guy. I mean, the Mads Mikkelsen bad guy, he gets killed at the end, but Strange solves the problem with logic and reason and sort of negotiating tactics. And he makes a deal with the supernatural monster. He doesn't defeat the supernatural monster. It's very sort of clever. And that's what Doctor Strange is always good at, being clever about things. Even though he's got magic and everything else, he was a smart guy. He knew how to, you know, manipulate the situation to his own ends. And so he makes a deal with Dormammu. He says, you know, we're going to be locked in this one moment for eternity, forever. You'll never be able to leave here. You're my prisoner unless you decide to leave my dimension alone and never come back again. And eventually Dormammu, he has to agree. He's got no out. He has no control over time. This one little mage guy has got a giant god essentially stuck forever in this one moment. And that's how that's how things are resolved. Everything's reversed. The explosions that were in the city are reversed, and everything's fixed, and everybody's fine, and the bad guy goes away, and Doctor Strange has won the day with smarts rather than with brawn, which is great. It was perfect. I mean, if the entire movie had kind of been along that line, it would have been wonderful. But it wasn't. You know, the moments that worked were very few and far between. The way that they laid out the story and revealed how things were working, etc., didn't work for me. So it's not a bad film. It's not unwatchable. It's entertaining. It's got a lot of things that are fun to see. But it didn't satisfy me. It didn't satisfy me as a fan of the character. It didn't satisfy me as someone who was really looking forward to the introduction of the magic and the occult into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because Doctor Strange is sort of the gateway drug for things like Ghost Rider and Blade and you know, Mephisto and all the other, that whole aspect of the Marvel Universe is opened up now with Doctor Strange. You can get into those kind of stuff. You can get into like straight magic type stuff and spiritual things. I'm really hoping that you know, they do a Ghost Rider TV series and a Blade TV series and a Moon Knight TV series. Like if they do that on Netflix, they introduce those three characters or characters like them, and then they do a sort of Defenders, Avengers team up thing and call it, you know, the Midnight Suns or whatever, that kind of thing, fighting some big nasty horror movie bad guy. That'd be great. And so at least on the basis of that mechanism, the Doctor Strange opens up that aspect of the Marvel Universe. I'm glad he's there. As the execution of the overall film and character, it had a lot of things that were lacking. And so that's where I'm at. Okay, now with the last 15 minutes or so, I only want to make this about an hour. I'm going to go to the chat. So chat, tell me more about what you think of the film, any questions you might have for me, whichever. I want to thank Bloodwing for being my hall monitor in the chat today. He with the wrench. I don't know if anybody else with wrenches are here right now. I'll say hi to C3 section. Hello. Let's see. Jacob, hello. Yes, Lycan Broadcasting Network. I only want Blade if they use Wesley Snipes. I think Wesley Snipes' expiration date is quickly passing to do another Blade movie, or Blade anything. I'm also not sure that Marvel would want to have a Blade property of theirs associated with movies that they did not produce from years and years ago. That might set some confusion in place. But I don't know what all the ins and outs are of that, contract negotiations or licensing or anything else. Bloodwing, you're not feeling good? Well, I'm sorry. I hope you get well soon. I know sick is no fun. I've been going through it in large or small portions for the last week or two. Weaponized Retard asks, Scribe, how far are you into The Flash? We finished season 2 the other day. Season 3 is there, but we're waiting on watching season 3 until we catch up with the other series like Arrow. Well, we've watched Arrow through season 4, Blade through season 2. Flash through season 2. We're working on Legends of Tomorrow. After we get through the first 2 seasons of Legends of Tomorrow, then we're going to watch Arrow season 5, then Flash season 3, and then go watch Supergirl season 2. And I think that'll have us all relatively caught up. Let's see. Vera Payne, I didn't see the movie because of the Tibetan issue. I don't know if I am overreacting or not. For the sake of this movie, it really doesn't matter, I guess. I was kind of pissed off that there was all the hubbub about it. But, I don't know what your politics are, but yeah, they changed that aspect to it. There's a lot of probably, social and cultural politics involved in that. It didn't really matter to me as a viewer so much because it's all got everything going anyway, but let's see. Scribe, have you read Flashpoint yet? I have not read it. This is from Jacob. I know I know most of the plot arc of it, though, just my peripheral information. Excuse me. C3 section says there was an unofficial direct-to-VHS version of Doctor Strange in the 90s known as Dr. Mordred. Don't quote me on that, though. No, you're absolutely correct. Stuart Gordon wanted to do a Doctor Strange movie. He couldn't secure the rights, so he made a movie called Dr. Mordred and changed enough about the character and everything to avoid rights issues. Jeffrey Combs played Dr. Mordred. It's a B-movie attempt at making a Doctor Strange film. It's not that good, but for the sake of being what it was, it is an interesting backstory to the whole Doctor Strange attempts to make a movie. W.R. Costin says, I watched and liked Legends of Tomorrow. Do you think that I'll like The Flash and the Arrow? Flash and the Arrow are great. Overall, the DC, all credit to them. Their movies pretty much suck, or at least in relative terms. But they've knocked it out of the park with their television shows. They've created a shared universe amongst these TV shows that is really, really entertaining. There are certain specific episodes or plot arcs or tropes within each of the shows that get a little old at times, but overall, Arrow is your kind of Batman-esque kind of deal. The Flash is the lighter, more upbeat, and so when those characters get together, there's much more interesting conflict between that. And then you've got Legends of Tomorrow, which sort of takes elements from both of those shows and smushes them together into its own show. And then I don't know much about how they merged Supergirl into that because originally she took place in a different universe. There was one crossover moment in Supergirl where the Flash shows up from the other network and the other TV show, which was handled fine. They're fun shows to watch overall. Let's see. Lycan Broadcast Network says, Scribe, it seems to me Marvel excels with the personal stories like Doctor Strange and even the Guardians. I count that as a personal story, but have been dropping the ball with the collabs. The first Avengers movie was really entertaining. The Avengers movies are big, bloated action films that just look at all the superheroes we can put into them. I'm waiting to see how the Defenders works on TV, but yeah, you got to remember it's really difficult to get that many characters and have them all be useful and memorable and everything in one story at one time, especially over the course of the real estate of just 2 hours. If you're building things up over time on a series like Legends of Tomorrow has a team of 8 people or 9 people or something, you can sort of work to earn the kind of dynamic you hope to have amongst a team. When you have like individual origin story movies and then you have to have a team up movie, it's a lot harder to get that synergy down because you don't have that much time to do so. And the Avengers movies are entertaining for the most part, but they're bloated and big in some places and they don't work as well. Civil War 1 is basically just Avengers, 3.5 or whatever. So, Scribe, have you seen any of the Injustice game? It is an alt superheroes universe. Yeah, I've watched lots and lots of footage from Injustice 2 and the Injustice Gods Among Us, and yeah, just about everything except movies, DC does really well in. What else we got? Scribe, you should watch Flash season 3 before Arrow season 5. Okay, I won't read any more. Don't spoil anything for me. I'll keep that in mind. Scribe, Supergirl is still her own thing since technically a different Earth. Okay, I thought maybe they had merged it. I'm sure they have other crossover things, but let's see what else. So yeah, the Doctor Strange opened up the door for Ghost Rider to reappear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I was very happy about. They did a really great job with that character, especially on network television. It was really dark and violent there for the first few episodes. And they also introduced the Darkhold. Now, the Darkhold is sort of the Necronomicon of the Marvel Universe. And there was a comic book series, a brief comic book series back in the 90s called Darkhold, Pages from the Book of Sin, that was released in conjunction with a revived Ghost Rider title and Morbius. They were doing a lot of the gothic horror comic stuff in the 90s under the guise of the Midnight Suns story arc, this big event in Marvel Comics. The Darkhold series, the first couple of issues were just amazing to me. The first one was a horror movie all by itself. I really wish that they hadn't taken that series into the cartoonish land they eventually did, because those first couple issues were like X-Files for the Marvel Universe, but also with like Cthulhu, Lovecraftian kind of stuff going on. It was great. That would have made a great TV series if they just took that first issue and based an entire series around that idea and that tone. So I'm happy that Doctor Strange occurred because, like I say, it opens the door for the occult, horror, darker stuff in the Marvel Universe to be justified in a way, or at least having some explanation. I'm still, as I said at the top of the broadcast, so to speak, I'm still not sure about how they've set the rules for magic. We see a lot of things being told to Strange about how things operate or how to use certain spells and certain tricks and things like that. But still, it's kind of kept nebulous, which I guess you can either be very specific about your magical rules or keep things very nebulous so you don't paint yourself into a corner. I'm not quite sure where Marvel's going with it yet, because, like I say, you have to walk the line where it's not a Deus Ex Machina. It's not a solution for everything. Scribe, have you read Wormwood Gentleman Corpse? I have not, Jacob. Scribe Light, have you thought about owning a comic book store when you retire? I hadn't even crossed my mind. I lived in comic book stores when I was much younger. Just getting old issues of things and reprints and just being a complete geek. I don't know how lucrative it is to have a comic book store these days. But yeah, no, it hadn't even crossed my mind. W.R. Costin, drunk guys are so funny. A little early to be drunk, though. Not even quite noon on the East Coast. Oh, is somebody drunk in the chat? Okay. If there aren't any other questions, guys, I'm going to wrap it up in just a couple minutes here. This is last call till the top of the hour. I don't know how often I'll do things like this. I haven't done a sort of like Sunday morning pop-up stream in quite a while. Only so often does it occur to me to say anything that isn't a video response. I'm looking forward to seeing Thor Ragnarok. The preview alone has caught my attention. Of course, that was the point. We'll see if the preview pays off with an actual resulting content of the film. Spider-Man Homecoming. I've said previously, I am cautiously optimistic. Sony is completely oversaturating the marketing with this thing and showing off every major scene in multiple different trailers. I practically have the entire film almost already in my head as a result of these trailers, which I don't appreciate. Just give me a trailer. I mean, the Thor Ragnarok, some other video did an analysis of this, of comparing the two trailers between the Homecoming trailer, the original one, and the Thor Ragnarok trailer, and just how these two things compare and contrast, and how much better the Thor Ragnarok trailer is towards selling you to go see the movie versus Spider-Man, which kind of gives everything away and doesn't do it very well. Jacob says, "Well, Scribe, this was a great time. Thanks. You're welcome. I may do things like this in the future, but they will be few and far between because I don't want to. I do enough streaming every night as it is. my voice gets a workout with 2 hours of streaming in the evenings, and that's also a sort of plug for the Monkey streams. We do Ranting Monkey, Some Dumb American, and myself. We do a nightly stream going over the events of the day, YouTube stuff we are working on or drama therein, and then trying to have some deep conversations either with ourselves or with our viewers. That happens nightly at 9 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Pacific. We rotate who's hosting the stream on any given night. Tonight is on Sunday is Ranting Monkey's channel. That order can change depending if someone's sick or has to go out or something else. So do subscribe to us or follow us on Twitter, or subscribe to all three of our channels and click that little bell button so you'll get the alert when we do stream on any particular night. Let's see. All right. Yeah. I was wondering why Jacob put a question mark at the end of that. It's like, thanks for the great time. Like, okay. Let's see. 3 more minutes, guys. I'm going to try to make it an even hour just for the fun of it, I suppose. Let's see what else. There was something else I was going to say. I can't remember now. I'm really curious how they're going to do a Doctor Strange sequel. I'm not sure how excited I am to see a sequel based on what they've already put up, because sequels are always generally lesser versions of the first movie, and this first movie was adequate but not exciting. So I hope they do something cool. I hope they go darker, and not darker in the sense of like Christopher Nolan grittiness and gray filter over everything, but just like a bit more serious, a bit more drama. Some actual creepy stuff would be nice, and not just make it sort of hammy, swashbuckling kind of stuff. We have characters for swashbuckling and kind of stuff. We want, at least I want, for my Doctor Strange some mystery, some intrigue, some scares, some just psychedelic weirdness, and for Strange to be the straight man. I mean, you can have a movie where the hero doesn't have to be some bombastic, Tony Stark or some, grinning and saluting Captain America. Can we have a darker, serious hero in the Marvel Universe? I don't know. Maybe when we get to Ghost Rider, maybe when we get to Blade, they'll go back to some serious sort of straight stuff. But anyway, Scribe, they might have the Living Tribunal. Well, yeah, the cosmic stuff, that's a whole other ball of wax. That's been hinted at and touched upon in the Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm more than certain that Infinity War with the Avengers will bring that to the forefront, and certainly Captain Marvel, when that gets released, will be a major part of that story. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other suggestions for short little streams or discussions you'd like to have with me or for me to talk about, by all means, post them in the comments or message me on Twitter, and maybe we'll cover that in the near future. In any case, hope you guys have a good weekend, and I hope to see you tonight on the Monkey Stream. Take care, guys.